Have you ever wondered why the coronavirus, its technical name, is called SARS-CoV-2? Let me say that again. The technical name for the coronavirus, or COVID-19, is actually SARS, SARS-CoV-2. SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, the CoV for coronavirus, and the -2, well, that's because this is not the first go-round. Did you know that back in 2003 and 4 there was a SARS-CoV-1 that also came out of China?
It's your weekend show with Bob Bierman.
Perhaps some of you knew that fact, that the coronavirus, as we call it, has been around once before. I guess we could call the original one COVID-03 instead of COVID-19. I've been doing a little bit of research about the first coronavirus and how many were infected, how many got ill, and how many died, and what was done dramatically different 17 years ago than what we're doing today. And also, I did a little bit of digging and found out what the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, had to say about that particular disease and what the appropriate treatment was. I think some of this information is going to be new to many of you that didn't know this happened once before. We were too busy with other things on our minds back in 2003 and 2004 around the world. One of the biggest differences with the original coronavirus was China's response. When they first knew that people were getting ill, well, they did what they had to do for a brief period of time to keep people from traveling and contain the virus for the most part where it originated. And in the nations, about 30 of them, that began to experience people coming in, the borders were closed down rapidly to people coming in from China. And thus the number of people infected was vastly lower, and the number of people that died also much lower. They figure that by the time they got to June of 2003, the last batch of the patients had recovered and were discharged from the hospital in Beijing. What they did back then is they had local and military health workers deployed for the emergency management of the outbreak. And quantities of emergency supplies, including PPE, that's your personal protective equipment, and medical apparatus, were sent to the frontline medical sectors. And these people and those materials were the key to winning the war against this novel coronavirus. Now, let's compare it to this recent go-round. If you go back in history, way back, probably in November of 2002, is when the Chinese first noticed this new disease getting a few people infected. And they warned other countries about this novel virus. They hadn't done the sequencing to fully understand. They did what they needed to do early on. They didn't wait. One of the big differences between SARS-1 and SARS-2 is the Chinese only limited travel in China from Wuhan. And people for the next several months were freely traveling in and out of Wuhan province all over the world. And you had the WHO saying, oh, this new virus is not a threat to humans at all. And rather than contain the virus early on, China allowed this virus to get out into the world and cause extreme havoc. Think about that. What would have happened had China been honest, in October, November of last year when this virus first appeared? Now, the CDC and other people, they'll tell you that this original virus back in 2003, the original coronavirus, was contained early. It is very similar to the one that we have traveling the world now. Why was the world not shut down? Why were economies not destroyed? How could have this gone all the way from China to the United States to across Europe, even into Australia? How could that have happened? It's because the WHO, well, let's face it, they're in the pockets financially to China. I really believe, as I read the material that I have access to all the same things you can, and even a few things because of my prior work in emergency management. And I try to get an understanding of what in the world is going on. Are we dealing in reality? What has really happened in our world today? How could we suddenly have this virus outbreak in the United States and suddenly have this incredible dashboard to track infections and deaths from Johns Hopkins University all spun up so rapidly? There was a pandemic exercise done at Johns Hopkins back in October of last year. So they had all the ingredients pre-built. There are times I have to wonder, how coordinated was this virus and what was its function? We'll be talking about a few things on the program today, including the new radio show that is supposed to debut on Monday the 10th. That's this coming Monday. That'll be on WRMI. I'm going to give you the times and frequencies just a bit later. And I hope that you will listen to this new program. I'm reaching out to people in the news media that I know and I trust. I'm reaching out to friends that have been around the business. I'm reaching out to people that understand things better than I, so we can use their knowledge to give you truth, factual truth. And I hope that you will either listen on shortwave. The program will also be available on podcast. Now, I'm of the belief that the tech tyrants, like the Googles and the Facebooks and the YouTubes and all that, and of course Google owns YouTube, they own your Android operating system, Apple owns your iPhone, they want to control the narrative. And I really believe that there'll be some videos that I will post that I guarantee will be taken down before too long. Oftentimes when somebody gets me a video link, the first thing I do is I use software that I have to download the video to keep a repository of those videos that are deleted by Facebook, deleted by Vimeo, and deleted by YouTube. There is definitely a concerted effort to control the narrative. You can't say certain things. You can't believe certain things because this is not the narrative of the day. The narrative of the day is coronavirus bad. It will kill you. Wear a mask. Stay at home. Watch the economy tank. It doesn't matter. It is so important. In Broward County, Florida, they're even discussing having people wearing their stupid mask in their homes. What has become of common sense? Well, let's go back to 2003. When China was honest up front and the virus was contained, it didn't become a worldwide pandemic because it was easily put out before it got out of hand. Let me give you an example of what I mean by putting it out before it gets out of hand. How many of you have ever had a little grease fire on your stove? It can happen. Something can spill over. It can be a very scary event if you've ever seen one. I can remember many, many years ago, about 20 some odd years ago, for whatever reason, I had bought one of those little foam fire extinguishers that just do a great job. They're very portable, and I had it in an easy-to-get place in the kitchen. And one day, we had a little grease fire start. It just, something splattered up, and it flamed up and caught the other stuff, and you could just see this fire going up. Now, a lot of people would try to throw water on that, and guess what happens? It just gets worse, it spreads, and the next thing you know, your kitchen is on fire as you're trying to call 911 and getting out of the house. By the time the fire department gets there, your kitchen is destroyed. If you fight it the wrong way, your house can be ruined. But I remember that first time my wife was in panic and she called my name, and I went into the kitchen, grabbed this little fire extinguisher thing, and poof, poof, it was out in an instant. Not even any real singeing because it had only had its first little flames for a few seconds. But what would have happened if we had just let the fire go and waited a while to respond? Am I going to wait till the cabinets are on fire or the entire kitchen is on fire or the whole house before I start to try to put it out? That's what's happened with this particular coronavirus. It was allowed. Let me say this again. It was allowed to get out into the world. And if you don't believe that, then explain to me why during the early months of this virus, the trouble in China was all in Wuhan. It never got to the nation's capital in Beijing. Why? Because they contained it, but they didn't stop it. People were still flying on jet airliners in and out of Wuhan. The whole time they are dealing with people getting sick and dying. Yet people, because of industry, we have put so much of our industries into China. For cheap labor, we have so many industries that have things manufactured in China. Does that make any sense? I mean, think about it for just one moment. Does it make any sense to you at all? At all? That we exported our jobs to a land that oppresses its people, where freedom is denied. You know, in China, one of the newest things they're doing now, if you want to get your government checked, you have to take down those pictures of Jesus. He's now forbidden. The war against religion, and Christianity in particular, is accelerating, not just in communist China, but all over the world. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes today. But getting back to this coronavirus, once it was out of hand and out of the country, the folks in Italy had no idea of what they were dealing with when they were suddenly overwhelmed with sick people. Now, why was northern Italy such a hotspot? It's because so many industries in that part of Italy are owned by China. China has tried to come up with a way to get rid of the negative nomenclature of made in China on some of their other products that they're trying to sell at a higher price. So it looks better to say made in Italy than made in China. And that's why many companies in Italy have been purchased over the years by China. And so that's why there is so much international travel between northern Italy and China. Look at the other places the virus rapidly spread. Of course, once you were inside the European Union, people travel all over, and the virus just spread all across Europe. Think of the many industries in the United States that are dependent upon China, including our pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. 90% of the ingredients are made in China. We could be held hostage by China. It's the world in which we live. I am telling you, China is a threat, economically and also to our health. Because frankly, they don't care. They really don't care about what happens to you or I. The president of China could care less if hundreds of thousands of people die. They just don't care. They're in it for power. They're in it for money. They're in it for world domination. They could have played honestly up front in November and warned the world. They could have shut down travel leaving in and out of Wuhan. They did if you wanted to go to Beijing. You couldn't come to Beijing from Wuhan. But you could fly to New York, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, nonstop flights. Look at the hot spots early on. They were all close to the international airports that served China. That's how it got into our nation from China. And while the cases are beginning to appear before we even had a way to test or confirm, probably as early as January and February, just like the little grease fire on the stove, nobody put it out because nobody was aware of these people infected here, there, and yonder until it had gotten out of hand. Once we understood there's something coming out of China, we closed down our borders. We stopped flights from China from coming into the United States. And there were some politicians that criticized that action as being some kind of a racist thing or xenophobic thing. Oh, there's nothing wrong with travel from China. A matter of fact, the Chinese New Year is coming up. Everybody go outside and celebrate the Chinese New Year. All at a time, we were beginning to understand that something terrible had been unleashed on the world. And even at the time we're closing down travel from China, even during that time, the WHO is saying this is not a dangerous thing at all. Nothing to worry about. Everything is fine. Yet I believe the WHO either was thoroughly deceived by China or they were willing to be participants in a scam. So let's go back down to the year 2003. Remember, this outbreak peaked in April of 2003. It kind of started in November. If you think about it now compared to the coronavirus today, we too kind of peaked in April. Though we've had these spikes, and I'm going to explain why we've had these spikes. I'm going to explain something about these pathogens that I learned from a think tank that has been doing some research on this since way back in the beginning. And they're a group that understood the first go-round and how it could be stopped and also how it could be treated. I'm going to share that in a few minutes too. We know a lot about a SARS virus because we've been through it once before. Though it never got as far out into the world as this one has, They seem to do the same thing. They seem to spread the same way. Currently in the United States, people will scream and almost get into fights over wearing a mask, a face covering. There are people out there right now that are putting on a face covering who foolishly believe it's going to protect them. They run around there with their stupid little gloves on, their mask on their face, driving in their car, then touching everything with their gloves, and touching their mask, and touching their face. And now we got Dr. Fraud Fauci wanting us to wear goggles. Maybe he's got his beer goggles on for all I know, but now he wants us to wear goggles. Are we going to wear gloves, a face mask, and goggles in our home next? Is that what it's coming to beat this virus? How many remember the discussions back in the end of March? We need to have a 15-day pause to flatten the curve. For the next 2.5 weeks, we're all going to stay home. Only essential businesses, like the big box stores and the liquor stores, will stay open. Everybody else stay home. And this will save us. This will stop it. Well, here we are months later, still practicing social distancing, and now we're required to wear a mask. Let me ask you a question. Is wearing a mask effective? A lot of people believe it. They've been told to believe it. And like sheeples, they believe anything they're told. And they do it. The worst part is people think that if they wear a mask, they're protecting themselves. It's like stopping a river with a chain link fence. It doesn't work. The microscopic size of that virus will fly millions. About 49 million of them can go through the little space in a typical mask being worn by the public today. And if you're wearing a bandana, well, that's even worse. I understand the theory, and I'm looking at the data from the first SARS outbreak and the 2 years of study that went in to understanding what a SARS-CoV virus is all about and what treatments they were given. I really believe that too much of this virus on this go-round has been made political. It has been made to control people and populations in ways they never envisioned could happen. Go back 1 year with me, just 1 year, and tell me, would you believe we'd be in the position we are today with this coronavirus? Would you believe the number of people that have died, if that number is accurate? And there's some wonderful paperwork you can find. When the CDC changed the way you count deaths, the number of corona deaths skyrocketed. It's not because they died of COVID-19. They may have died with COVID-19 or symptoms that might appear to be COVID-19, though never tested. And then treatment options that have become political hotcakes. I'll tell you more, but right now, quick break. This is Your Weekend Show.
On the air and online at yourweekendshow.com with Bob Bierman. It's Your Weekend Show with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to Your Weekend Show. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. Today, I've been talking about the SARS-CoV virus. It's not the first time. Many people have never made the connection of calling it SARS-CoV-2. That means this is the second go-round. And I told you on the program just a little bit ago that this was around the first time in 2003 and 2004. And I found, at one of the most reliable medical sources you can ever look at, this is a website dedicated to the study of viruses from biomedical sciences. And this article that I'm looking at right now was put up on that website on the 22nd of August in 2005. That's like 15 years ago. I guess they didn't have a chance to scrub everything away. It has been accessed almost 700,000 times by professionals. It has been cited about 40,000 times over the years. And much of the information and those that wrote this material, well, they're not some fly-by-nights. This is the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta and other worldwide health organizations before they became so incredibly political. And so I'm looking at this article dated the 22nd of August, 2005, and it talks about the background. The severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, is caused by a newly discovered coronavirus, which they called SARS-CoV. Just kind of like SARS-CoV-2. And they were talking about, at the time, there was no, at the time it appeared, no effective prophylactic or post-exposure therapy available. But here's what they did report in all their studies as they started putting information together. We report, are you ready for this? Now hold on to wherever you're sitting down so you don't fall over. We report, however, this is right from this article, that chloroquine, like hydroxychloroquine, has strong antiviral effects on SARS-CoV infection of primate cells. These inhibitory effects are observed when the cells are treated with the drug, either before or after exposure to the virus, suggesting both a prophylactic and therapeutic advantage. In addition, the well-known functions of chloroquine, such as elevation of endosmolar pH, the drug appears to interfere. And it explains how this works and can be a therapy for those that have been affected by SARS-CoV. And they now believe these are at clinically admissible concentrations. It affects the virus receptor binding. In other words, it works. They then concluded that chloroquine is effective in preventing the spread of SARS-CoV in cell culture. Favorable inhibition of the virus spread was observed when the cells were either treated with chloroquine prior to or after infection. In addition, the indirect assay described herein provides a simple and rapid method for screening SARS-CoV antiviral compounds. Now, wait a minute. I thought the bankrupt United States media said that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work and it might even kill you. Do you see what's happening? 15 years ago, after we had our first worldwide go-round with a SARS-CoV infection, thankfully that was contained before like a fire gets out of hand, was stopped, they discovered that it was effective and it works. It pointed out this severe acute respiratory syndrome is an emerging disease that was first reported in the Guangdong province of China in late 2002. The disease rapidly spread to at least 30 countries within months, and a concerted worldwide effort led to the identification as the SARS-CoV, a novel number of the family of coronaviruses. Wow. We somehow knew back in 2005, after we studied worldwide that hydroxychloroquine was the salvation of people affected with this disease, and it worked. It worked. It also was considered effective and safe. Let me say that again. It was thoroughly considered, due to the severity of the SARS-CoV infection and the potential for the rapid spread of the disease, sound familiar? And the absence of a proven effective inhibitor, it is important to identify drugs that can be effectively used to treat or prevent the SARS-CoV infections. And they discovered this particular drug, chloroquine, that was identified in 1934, works. And it's less than 60 cents a dose. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not pulling this off the dark web or some obscure website. This comes from one of the most respected medical journals in the world. And it was written by, of all places, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. Are you seeing something wrong here? The President of the United States mentions that there is evidence that hydroxychloroquine can be an effective treatment for those suffering this virus, especially the earlier the treatment, the more effective it is. Let me say that again, the earlier the treatment. It also has been found in testing to be a prophylactic, to help prevent you from even getting the virus. So why is it that these Democrat governors have done everything in their power to tell doctors they cannot prescribe it? It is all political if you hadn't figured it out yet. It is politics. I am going to say something you may find outrageous, but try to prove me otherwise. If we've known this since 2003, 4, and 5, and you can find it if you're willing to take the time to look online to reputable sources. I'm not talking a fly-by-night internet site that somebody just put up. It's not me putting it up because I think I heard from a friend of a friend who got it from another friend. I'm looking at the study. Let me put it this way, depending upon, you ready for this? Pre-treatment using hydroxychloroquine, depending upon the dosage, could reduce infectivity by 28%, 53%, ready for this, and 100%, depending upon the dose. If you took the normal maximum dose, or actually treatment dose, it was 100% effective back in 2004. So why, in the name of all that is holy, are we waiting for companies to give us a vaccine? If we know this works, if we are trying to burn out this virus, wouldn't it make sense to develop a combination of treatment and herd immunity? Because once a pathogen has no more path, it will snuff itself out in time. That is something we've known for a long, long time in medicine. I've been reading these articles. A month ago, Newsweek was still complaining about the ineffectiveness of what Sweden had done and how it may have been dangerous and it may have cost lives and it may not have done anything, and all the lockdowns we're doing in the United States and around the world, those are what you got to do. Destroy economies, destroy mental health, destroy society, decimate education, have people live in fear. That's how you solve the virus problem. And Sweden took a different approach, saying, we're going to protect those that are the most vulnerable. You realize that the vast majority of people that die are elderly and have other underlying conditions. This is not a virus that grabs you with a super high rate of killing you unless you fit into one of a very few limited categories. Explain something to me. Teachers' unions. The thought just occurred to me. We considered the guy at the liquor store selling alcohol essential. We considered the person checking you out at a grocery store or at a big box store essential. And those people in the stores were seeing hundreds, if not thousands of people face to face for the past 4 months. We also know that children seldom get this and rarely, if ever, can even pass the virus on. That much we do know. But teachers are afraid to go back to the schools or they're going to die because some child will have the virus and I will die if I come back and teach at school. Yet, the person making minimum wage at Walmart or any other big box store, I guess they're expendable and teachers are not. Do you see the double standard going on here, friends? This, to me, is insanity of all insanities. That's all I can tell you. I have never seen such insanity in my entire life. Running around wearing masks, telling us the drug we knew worked will kill you. This will kill you, that will kill you. Protesting will not kill you. Going to a Trump rally will kill you. And I know somebody's going to say, yeah, but look at Herman Cain. Well, nobody knows if he got it there or not because he had been traveling extensively for 3 weeks. And he also is a survivor of stage 4 colon cancer. There's a lot going on in that equation. We don't know. And I'm not going to say yay or nay. We'll talk about these infection numbers. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Once again, I want to remind you, this is Your Weekend Show. We have a website, yourweekendshow.com, yourweekendshow.com. I would encourage you to take the time and visit the website. I'd love to hear from you. And in the next segment, when I come back, I'm going to talk about a couple of other things that are all tied together in this coronavirus pandemic. This is Your Weekend Show.
On the air and online at yourweekendshow.com with Bob Bierman. It's Your Weekend Show with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to Your Weekend Show, Part 3. I'm so thankful so many of you do listen. And I want to mention real quick, I mentioned this earlier to those listening on shortwave. We start a new program this coming week on Monday, the 10th of August. A new program will be launched on shortwave and also will be available as a podcast. And I'm going to give you the information for it right now. The program's name is going to be Truth to Ponder, and I'll be hosting it. And as time goes by, I'll be bringing in other voices to join with me. This is quite an undertaking, and it's going to be a little bit costly on my part. I'm buying the airtime to make sure you can get this information to you. I have really been thinking about this for quite a while. To do a program, because I can sit and watch the TV. I can sit and say, I know the real truth on this issue because of the work that I've done. And I'm watching the media just completely ruin and distort for political purposes everything out there. The media is nothing but a tool, unfortunately. And they're making fools out of you. The media doesn't really care about you. They care about an agenda. The world doesn't care about you. They care about an agenda. The teachers' unions do not care about your students. They care about an agenda. One of the things that the teachers in California are demanding, they're going to go on strike. We're not going to go back and get infected by these kids and die. Of course, the person at Walmart that they go to see, that's not going to happen. Or if they're protesting for Black Lives Matter, that's not going to happen. If they're burning down buildings or destroying churches, that's not going to happen. Only if we go to school or a church are we going to die from the coronavirus. And how many of those deaths are not even from COVID-19? We know a lot about this virus. We've known a lot about it. And why are we now suddenly changing the narrative for a political purpose? And this is what I find most disturbing. You are being played for a fool. They keep moving the goalpost. At first it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Well, maybe a month. Now 2 months. Now 4 months. We're still trying to flatten this cotton-picking curve after 4 months. And the death numbers keep piling up because we don't use hydroxychloroquine, because that's an evil thing. We can't do that. Dr. Fraud Fauci is telling you you cannot take it because we haven't tested it. Well, they did back in 2003, 2004, and 2005. 2-3 years of study on how effective this was. And when doctors use it with success, we're supposed to not believe them. Anytime a doctor posts something that says how well this has worked with 50 or 100 or more patients where the success rate has been 100%, YouTube takes it down because you can't see that. You can't see the truth because we need to keep you in a deception and a lie. We need to unseat a president. Don't you know that 100,000 or 150,000 dead people, it's a small collateral damage price to pay? And we run around Walmart wearing a mask. It wasn't that long ago that Dr. Fraud Fauci himself said,
right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill.
That wasn't that long ago when he was saying, don't wear a mask. You don't need a mask. If you look back at the numbers in April, around the middle of April in terms of the rise in deaths. Now, we'll talk about infections separately. I don't want to even go into that at the moment, but we will in a second. The number of deaths peaked. They grew rapidly, and then gradually over time they have declined. But our testing capability has gone up, and that has had a lot to do with the people that have been testing positive. Now, before you say you're some kind of conspiracy theorist, I've had 2 members of our family in different parts of the country contract this virus. One is completely recuperated. Another is just about done. New Jersey and the state of Oregon is where they contracted theirs. So I know that it's out there. But this impression that if anybody gets it, they're simply going to die, suddenly are going to just die, is a myth. You look at the numbers carefully in Sweden now. A little over a month ago, Newsweek, not exactly a conservative magazine, was writing about how terrible things were in Sweden. And then a month later, a little over a month later, there's an article out saying maybe Sweden had it right after all because their infection rates and their death rates have virtually gone to zero. And they didn't do all of this social nonsense and mask wearing and staying at home and closing everything down that we did. In other words, the pathogen went through the society. They protected as much as they could early on or after they figured out the need, the elderly. and their deaths peaked and dropped off like a rock because the pathogen worked its way through. Places using hydroxychloroquine have seen phenomenal results, especially when combined with zinc and another compound. Doctors report, and as fast as their reports go up online, they are knocked off by YouTube. And it's called fake news, politifact. I call it politifake. They have an agenda. You have got to buy the agenda that you're going to die. You have to vote by mail. You have to not send your kids to school because your child will kill their teacher. If you don't believe it, listen to all the hype and the nonsense and the incredible we've got to do this, we got to shut it down, we got to destroy the economy, it doesn't matter. We have to do it all. And then Sweden stands there by itself, and for a while their numbers were worse than their European counterparts, but within a month, they're doing better than anybody else around them. What does that tell you? You've been lied to. Fauci lied to you. He told you at one time when he did say the truth. Now then it became, notice how it evolved. It wasn't that you don't need a mask. It's ineffective. That's what he was saying not that long ago. Then by the time we got to June, well, maybe it would be a nice symbol that we all show that we're in this together by wearing a mask. Remember that? We're all in this together. But once again, I want to change gears for just a second and tell you something else that just disturbs me and makes me a little bit cautious. Why is it that in 2017, Dr. Fauci was warning that we're going to have a surprise pandemic? What did he know then that we don't know now? I only ask this question because this is exactly, precisely what he said not that long ago, like 3 years ago.
I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relatively short presentation, you will understand why the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with.
Are you connecting the dots yet? 2017, there's going to be a pandemic. There's going to be one. There's no doubt about it. And this pandemic that has come along came out of China, like the first SARS-CoV virus back in 2003 and 4, though they were probably in China a little bit more forthcoming, and the virus was suppressed early on. It wasn't allowed to get out of hand and all over the world like this one was. Maybe the Chinese learned something about pandemics in 2003 and 4. And you have to wonder why this virus, it's been said it's been around for a while. We're told it came out of some wet market in Wuhan, a town that just so happens to have a virus lab. Just coincidence in a country of I don't know how many millions or billions of people. Just coincidence. It was there. And then Dr. Fauci gets on board to be in charge of riding herd on this entire episode since February. Actually, since January. And we start with the pause for 2 weeks. It's become 4 months. We've gone from a handful of businesses that might survive to 100 and some odd thousand that have closed their doors forever because of COVID-19, which is nothing more than SARS-CoV part or version 2. We already knew what to do. back in 2003, 4, and 5. And Fauci has fought it every step of the way. It's going to be a vaccine. Well, where's the vaccine for the last one? Where were you on the vaccine, Dr. Fraud? You're the one telling us we have to have a vaccine injected. We might get it this year, might get it next year. Well, maybe we should just social distance and stay at home for another year. He doesn't care if business goes down the tubes. He doesn't care about the psychological damage of having your child running around in a Walmart wearing a mask. He doesn't care. I'm beginning to think we're being had. Remember, he said you don't need one. Well, let's all wear a mask as a symbol. He did say that, too, if you hadn't forgotten. And now a mask will save us. Let's keep the schools closed. Let's make life absolutely intolerable. And by whatever it takes, we got to keep it locked down and destroyed until at least November the 3rd. I don't trust him. I don't trust Dr. Scarf either. I keep reading the numbers. I keep doing the research. And when you come out and you find this thing archived since 2005, cited over 600, almost 700,000 times as a true and accurate article for people in the medical profession, telling us then, but only because President Trump said, hey, try hydroxychloroquine. Suddenly it becomes a political issue. Are you following what I'm saying? So wear your mask, as ineffective as they are. Believe everything that you're told to do. I'm appalled by what I see. I told you before about how the infection numbers are only those things that are confirmed by testing. And the testing has varied quite a bit since all this started to kick up in late February and March. There were very few test kits available. But over time, more test kits went out. Now, a lot of them have been inaccurate. We've had cases where people never showed up for their test and got a positive test in the mail, which makes me wonder about some of the people who are contracting to do these tests. I'm really concerned. Wouldn't you be? We now learn that people that died in motorcycle accidents were classified, until they got caught, as COVID-19 deaths. We know of people that have died of gunshot wounds, COVID-19. We know we can assume or guess. And by the way, the official flu season was magically ended on the 4th of April of this year. There's a lot we need to be exploring. We'll get into some of it next weekend, and also on the new radio show that'll be on WRMI, 7 p.m. Eastern on 9395 and 10 p.m. Eastern on 9455 kilohertz. Don't forget the website, yourweekendshow.com. That is yourweekendshow.com. I'd love to hear from you. Would you send me an email? It's time we get serious about what's going on in our world today. And until next week, may God richly bless you is my prayer.
On the air and online at yourweekendshow.com with Bob Bierman.